Happy Monday, everybody. I hope you had a great weekend. It seems like the weather is making it like we're not ready to give up on the summer, at least here in Chicago, but I'm quite sure winter will come to Chicago nonetheless. It is notable that this past summer was the hottest on record, not a political statement, just one about the heat. Let's review this past week's market action. Let's preview the week ahead. Monday opened higher on, as it seemed, was a oversold bounce following last week's prior moves, renewed hopes of multiple and large rate cuts, as well as the glide path for the soft landing being on the pages of the market book for the day. There was some midday volatility as the New York Fed Consumer Survey had solid inflation expectations. Not sure who told the market that it should care about inflation again. It seems like the Fed is telling us that that ship has sailed. Time to watch the labor markets and growth. The good news book was still in control. Even higher than expected consumer credit outstanding was not enough to derail the rally. Overall, just say up and you would be pretty solid. Oil, gold, copper, dollar stocks, it was a green day all over. You would never know that the CPI was due out on Wednesday. Stay tuned. Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ each up over 1% on the day. Stocks did gap higher on Tuesday as more eco data was pointing to the idea of a 50 basis point rate cut this week. Small business optimism and OPEC's demand estimates were all weak. Again, read that as soft landing coming. Markets revisited negative territory later in the morning before rebounding after the financials dragged markets down. JP Morgan was down almost 5% on the day. Follow-through selling did not come about, and the 3-year Treasury auction was solid. A little positioning for the CPI report, if you want to believe that, and markets did get some buying into the close. Techs gave the markets a boost, not all across the board like Monday. Oil and copper sold off, gold was up, the dollar was stable. By the end of the day, the Dow was actually down 1/4%, S&P up almost 0.5%, the NASDAQ was up just under 1%. Wednesday brought the anniversary of September 11th. And as I heard our rabbi say this weekend, a whole generation of high school children who never knew about September 11th here in the United States. And until October 7th, it was really hard to explain it to them. Now, unfortunately, they can understand it. As always, I will try to leave any politics and geopolitics out of this and stay focused on the way any of this affects the markets and the economy. Spoiler, the markets on Wednesday were all over the place. August CPI was out, and the idea of a 50 basis point cut was priced out, and that had stocks selling off hard at the open. But a group lined up to turn that around. First, at the Goldman conference, NVIDIA CEO came out and spoke again about the growth potential and demand for AI chips. Combine that with Oracle earnings, and in the week, and enthusiasm for AI was back in the forefront. And with that, the buyer stepped in. Just to recap, by 10 a.m., the Dow was down more than 700 points. The NASDAQ down more than 250 points. As the cheerleaders of tech, large caps were out, the market staged an impressive reversal, finishing strong even into the close and up for the day, nearly daily and all-time highs. But at the end of the day, the Dow was, again, down by 734 points intraday, closed up almost 125 points, or about 1/3 of 1%. The S&P at one point down nearly 2%, finished up over 1%. The NASDAQ reversed also, ending up almost 2.25%. This was the first time that the S&P has dropped 1% intraday and then closed the day higher by 1% or more since October 2022. Markets obviously came to terms with that the Fed will still cut rates, maybe not as fast as one thought. But oil was up, copper was up, stocks up, even gold was up. Stocks were back and forth across the up and down line early on Thursday. PPI was out, a bit higher than expectations. Jobless claims also a bit higher than expectations. The Fed whisperer, Nick Timiraos from the Wall Street Journal, he did give the market the idea that 50 basis points may still be in the cards in his article in the Wall Street Journal. Oil was up, gold up, the dollar was down. By the end of the day, the Dow was up about 2/3 of 1%, S&P up 3/4 of 1%, the NASDAQ was up 1%. Friday closed out the week, and not without some of its own actions. Boeing seems that it cannot get out of its own way. The list is long, but now a strike again. And rating agencies are not being as patient where they're worried about their credit. Stocks did open a bit higher, add in the University of Michigan survey with looks at inflation in the next 1 year at the lowest level since December 2022, but the 5-year view was the highest since November 2023. The week ended in the green. For Friday, the Dow was up 3/4 of 1%, the S&P up 1/2 of 1%, the NASDAQ was up about 2/3 of 1%. For the week, best in 2024, going into a Fed meeting this week, Dow added 2.5% for the week, S&P 4% for the week, and the NASDAQ up almost 6% for the week. Did someone say that we should expect volatility in September? Well, here you got it. Let's preview this coming week, Fed week. There really is still some question about a 50 or 25 from the Fed, but little doubt we'll get something, a cut of some sort. So no doubt there, most of people are saying. With that coming, of course, we have to see what Powell will say in the press conference, and we will get some very important eco data this week. I'd suggest it may be even more important in the long term than this quarter or half. We will get manufacturing survey, but that will even be eclipsed by retail sales, some housing, the Fed, and the Fed's other mandates, of course, jobs for the week. Yes, 1 week, not the whole year, quarter, or even month, but for the week. This week will all be focused on the Fed and Wednesday. We'll also get decisions from central banks across the world: Brazil, Norway, South Africa, the Bank of England, and we'll end with the Bank of Japan. Remember, I maintain that while we will see some cuts, the data we really need to watch is the growth data. As long as we slow and don't fall off a growth cliff, we can and just might see something like a soft landing. I will remind you, by the way, these central banks can make a difference around the world. Watch specifically the Bank of Japan, as their moves last time did catch markets off guard and offsides in the yen carry trade. Before we close, just a quick point to balance things off. First, bulls are in control and the bears have the burden of proof on them. News is not bad enough to slow the markets down, and the wall of worry that markets actually like to climb is still around, and that keeps things moving up. So to balance that off, growth is slowing. We are watching that closely. Rates are falling, and we'll see if that scares anyone or just excites them. Earnings growth may have seen the high point last quarter, so headwinds are there. And finally, political and geopolitical risks are still there. Just please keep a level head. There is a lot coming, short term and long term. Regardless, another important week, but as I emphasize over and over again, this is the short term, and this is what this video points to do. We need to stay overall focused on the long term and your goals. Please keep watching the Friday videos for planning ideas. There's so much to keep in mind. Mostly, what are you trying to accomplish, when, and with what risk? Please keep an eye out for a few upcoming special videos. And as always, the Friday planning video. Have a great week.